Materia Toure.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. A few weeks ago I spoke on the second reading of the tax bill that brought into force this budget's regressive tax reform policies, the policies of a national government that does not care for Aotearoa and does not care for its people, and certainly does not care for our children. Now, that tax bill, passed with the help of the Māori Party and the ACT parties, gave tax cuts to the very wealthy and provided for tax reform that would charge our most vulnerable families much, much more for the very basics that they need to live: their food, their clothing, the basics. Now, the Green Party has a vision for a much smarter economy than this national government could ever imagine, a much fairer society than this National ACT Māori Party coalition were prepared to provide. We have a vision for a smart economy that delivers on real prosperity for this country, a vision for a fairer community where every New Zealand child, every child in this country, lives in a safe society where they have access to warm, dry housing, safe and affordable food, and quality public education and quality publicly provided health care. Now, this John Key-led government chooses instead a society of haves and have-nots. John Key's government chooses a society where the poorest New Zealand children go without shoes, food and shelter. And that is the choice that was made in this budget. The negative impacts of this budget on the plight of children in this country cannot be underestimated, but have been by National and John Key, because National and John Key are so divorced from the reality of the ordinary lives of New Zealanders. Now, when the Green Party launched Mind the Gap, our package of solutions to deal with the widening gap between rich and poor, we focused on the fact that Aotearoa is one of the worst countries in the developed world for income disparity. We know that inequality hurts every child and every family. Now, the National Party backbenchers are shouting behind me because they know that they are doing nothing for children in this country, and it's uncomfortable for them to hear this. We know that New Zealand is one of the most unequal countries.
Point of order, Honourable Trevor Miller.
Mr Speaker, it might be the speaker systems having a little bit of a problem again, but despite the member not being one of the quieter members in the House, I'm having a bit of trouble hearing her, and I can't tell if it's the speakers or the noise from opposite or a combination of both. But could you?
Well, I will now monitor it, and the member may continue. I'm
Thank you,
afraid
Mr. Speaker.
I was engrossed in a matter of order that I was researching, and I probably wasn't paying the attention I should. Materia Toure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that New Zealand is one of the most unequal countries in the developed world. We are 23rd out of 30 in the recent OECD report. On inequality, we are the 6th most unequal country among highly developed countries that came out of the United Nations Human Development Report last year. Even at the Welfare Working Group debacle earlier this week, the head of social policy for the OECD, Dr. Monica Quisa, says that New Zealand's child poverty is one of the worst in the OECD. And she said that 15% of children in this country live in families who survive on less than half the median income. Less than half the median income. Now let's make this clear. That's around 120,000 children who live in families whose weekly income is less than $270 a week. And that is okay with this national government. This national government doesn't mind. When Bill English was questioned on inequality, what did he say? Our budget doesn't really make any difference, is what he said. Doesn't really make any difference to that at all. Because John Key and Bill English, the National ACT Māori Party coalition, doesn't care that 120,000 New Zealand children are living in families whose income is less than $270 a week. Well, the Green Party does care, because income inequality like this has devastating effects on children. At the launch of Mind the Gap, our proposal to deal with this issue, we heard about a mother who was so malnourished that she could not produce breast milk for her child. That mother lives here in this country. We heard about the 20,000 children who go to school. Now, the National Party's giggling over there. I can see the Minister of Treaty Settlements and the Minister of Pacific Island Affairs and Sandra Gowding having a giggle about the fact that 20,000 New Zealand children go to school each day without sufficient food, shoes and raincoats. Those are New Zealand children living today in the 21st century in this country. Now, this budget then came out and increased the gap by shifting money from our poorest and most vulnerable children into the richest families and corporations. Just after the budget was released, there were 2 more reports that came out highlighting the plight of children and child poverty in this country. The Best Start in Life report from the Public Health Advisory Committee ranked our country 29th out of 30 for child health and safety. That is how bad we are. We are almost the worst in the OECD for child health and safety. Increasing financial pressures on families, widening socio-economic disparities and low government investment in early childhood, which this national-led government is doing once again, are reasons for our children's appalling health status in this country and compared globally. Every one of those factors has been made worse by this budget. A GST increase that puts pressure on low-income families, tax cuts that widen the gap, and funding cuts to early childhood education. The Children's Housing Futures report that came out also just a few days after the budget showed how important housing is for the health and well-being of children. It found that children's housing in New Zealand is worse than the OECD average, and that many children, New Zealand children, are living in poor quality, unaffordable, insecure and crowded housing. Children are more likely than any other age group in this country to live in crowded housing. Now, there are 800,000 children living in this country. Nearly half of the children in this country are living in housing that is cold, damp and expensive to heat. That's 375,000 New Zealand children are living in cold, damp and expensive to heat homes. 120,000 children live in families who earn less than $270 a week, and that is okay with this National Act Māori Party government. So what did the budget do? Well, it slashed the housing budget. It slashed the state housing budget by $100 million, leaving 10,000 people and their children languishing on the State House waiting list. John Key's government chose to give big tax cuts to corporations, while nearly half of New Zealand's children live in cold, poor quality housing. And let's just have a think about who some of these people are who are making the decisions. You know, Paula Bennett, she had, well, she was a beneficiary. Paula Bennett was a beneficiary. Her child, no, well, that's right. Her child had the opportunity of a state welfare system that could provide for her and provide for Paula's education. Now, John Key was, as a child, had access to a state house where he and his family could be housed. But where is the provision for New Zealand's children today for those things? Where is the support for the solo parents who have to take care of their children in poor, cold, damp housing, where those children are not going to have access to state housing because this government has cut the state housing budget? Why is it that this government and those who make the decisions, the responsible decision makers like John Key, like Paula Bennett, are responsible now for stripping away from today's children, New Zealand's children, the same entitlements and rights that they had when they needed state support? They have lifted the ladder behind them. They are taking from New Zealand's children the same entitlements that they had when they needed state support. That is grossly unfair. It is grossly unfair. Today's children deserve the same support that John Key did as a child and that Paula Bennett and her family did when she needed state support. That will not be provided to New Zealand's children today under this government. But it's not just about the solutions that we have for reducing inequality, because facts are that there are huge savings that can be made. And in our estimation of providing 6,000 more state houses, progressive pricing on electricity, extending the in-work tax credit to more low-income families, we could save some $2 billion a year and costs to the health system from the loss of work for respiratory illnesses from cold and damp housing. If we increase the minimum wage so that families can be supported